and welcome back to Coffee with Kim. I'm very excited because today I've actually got a guest on the show. So here you can see Jess Dyson. Jess runs a successful coaching business called Redefined Coaching, and we really connected through similar stories of having an eating disorder and then overcoming that and getting back to living a life based on values, really. Jess studied at Auckland University. She has a bachelor social work. She's also completed postgraduate study in child and adolescent mental health. And since then, she's also done specialized training in a number of eating disorder treatments. And so, Jess, from my understanding, your business, you help women with is it women and men, both, or mainly women?
Mainly just women.
Yeah. Doesn't specifically say that, but yeah, I understand that's more common.
And everything. So I don't think it's that appealing to guys.
Yes, yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So you help people with eating disorders and disordered eating, and also body image. And you often work with treatment teams as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. And then you've been recovered from your eating disorder for 13 years. Is that right?
Yeah, around 13 years. It's been a long time, but I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm looking forward to diving into that with you. The first question I have for you, Jess, is I was going through your story on your website and just looking at, when you had your first triggers and what led to your eating disorder. And I find this really interesting because, even for women who don't necessarily end up with an eating disorder like anorexia, we often have a moment in time where we get triggered into having a disordered relationship with food and our body. And quite often it is quite early on. I remember mine was around 12 or 13. And so I always find it really interesting to understand where does these disordered relationships with food in our body, where does this actually originate from? So you said in here that it was a comment about your weight. So could you please, tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for me, I think for girls, our bodies change through puberty, right? And we all have different timings of how our body changes. And so there's a lot of change going on. And for me, I'd always grown up being probably called skinny and different things like that. And being told, me and my sisters were always told how pretty we were. And it was kind of just became something I was good at. When you get compliments on things, you're like, I'm good at this. This is who I am. So it became an identity in itself. And I remember being at a friend's birthday party, and I was just eating. And I remember being extra hungry that day too. Don't know why. So I was eating all the party food. And I just remember some friends just commenting on my weight and just being like, oh, you have a big butt. And this is before big butts were in fashion, And for me, it kind of just shook my world because I was used to being perfect in a way. And you had this identity of this is what I'm good at to actually, there's something wrong with me. And so started to look in the mirror, and my perspective shifted kind of almost overnight. I no longer saw myself as beautiful or how I'd kind of always seen myself, but instead I began to see myself as fat. I began to see myself as ugly, as something to be ashamed of. I felt embarrassed. And being the type of personality I am, I was like, I'll change this. I don't have to live with this. I'll change it and I'll make myself perfect again. And so I just went on a simple diet. And it was slowly by slowly cutting things out. And then you get more compliments, and it was like, oh, this feels good. I'll just keep doing this. But it was almost overnight that it turned into an eating disorder. It went from being this really positive thing of compliments and feeling good and having energy to this place of it was really dark and feeling really, really trapped, and with lots of horrible thoughts and feelings. So that was kind of it for me.
Wow, all because of one comment that got made to you at a party about your butt being big.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then that triggered a whole lot of negative thought patterns and shifted your belief around, whether you were enough.
Yeah. And decided to change it. it all came back to the decision to change it. Because often, like, something I found with body image is it comes with horrible emotions. And so a lot of us, we always try and escape horrible emotions, right? And so for me, it was just this way of escaping. How do I escape this? How do I fix it? But it was only a temporary fix. And then it ended up in the biggest battle of my life. So
yes. And the other question I have is, in terms of your upbringing, like when I reflect on all the things that led to a disordered relationship with food and my body, like you can even look at your upbringing, and I think I grew up in like a relatively fat phobic environment, and I'm wondering, like, when you reflect now on your family environment, was there anything there that you think contributed to what you ended up going through?
I don't think, like, my family is not fat phobic. My dad's part of the police, so he would always be at the gym and always training and very fit. And mum's always been quite fit as well. And I remember parents doing diets and different things like that. But I think for me, it was more the comparison, like, of just hearing people's comments, probably just randomly in society offhand, and kind of creating that as like a belief and kind of different ideas. Like, I remember at the age of 10, we went to Australia as a family holiday. And this is probably how far back it goes as well, you know, the eating disorder stuff starts a long time before eating disorder often. And we stayed at this motel, and every night you stayed, you got a free Big Mac combo voucher. And I remember as a 10-year-old, like most 10-year-olds be like, yeah, cool, I'll have that. And I was like to mum and dad, I don't want to get fat. And it was just kind of this fear. And it was like, as a 10-year-old, I had already put stuff in place because of just what I'd heard from different people, probably more so in society, which kind of shaped what I believed, and kind of, I had an idea back then of what I wanted to look like and what I didn't want to look like as well, based on what I saw, based on what I heard, based on kind of the mixed messages you kind of get as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that. So it wasn't so much your family that was saying, you know, you're small and you're lean, and they weren't the ones putting, like, celebrating all that. It was from who? Like friends, and
I think
random people,
like random people and wider people in society, you know. And I think, like, you compare yourself to people, you get praised for different things. And I think even innocently as friends, like, I don't know if people do this, but me and my friends kind of grew up and we would tell each other our weights. And it was like, I weigh this much. And when you were younger in primary school, it's like, I'm gaining weight. Like, this is cool. You know, it was like trying to be the heaviest back then. But I guess because you're aware of people's weight, you try, and it flips at some stage. And it's like, who can be the skinniest? And you're involved in conversations, and suddenly you're just like, oh, maybe I'm not the skinniest. I'm not the best. And all those sorts of different things. So yeah, that was probably for me what kind of drove it.
Yeah, I can totally resonate. It's growing up, and as soon as you start getting, like you say, sell it, like the idea of being like slim or beautiful as a sign of, it's like, it's good and that's what we should be striving for, and that gives you like the gold medal. It gets into your mind, that's what I should be striving for. And I think a lot of people, I think a lot of women have gone through that same experience, because I know I have. This is just another example of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the other thing I saw in here was that you used to be a dancer. So I've got a couple of questions around this. The first one was, did your time as a dancer, do you think, at all contributed to your relationship with your body?
So for me, my journey is like very different to the average person when it comes to dance. So I wasn't actually a dancer before I had an eating disorder. Like, mum had always tried to get me into dance, but I actually hated dancing. And just I'd rather be playing basketball or different things like that, or running around on a touch field. But what happened for me is how dancing actually saved my life. So it didn't actually contribute to my eating disorder, it more saved me. Because I went to a dance audition to try and secretly lose weight and burn calories without mum and dad knowing. But got into a hip hop crew, and then discovered my passion for dance through this. And on the day where I was meant to be hospitalized was the day that we found out our hip hop crew had gotten through to nationals. And so I remember sitting in the doctor's office kind of just being like, do I want to miss out on this? Do I want to keep being robbed from things? And it was actually kind of that greater purpose to fight for. And so dance actually became the very thing I fought for. And I had a certain amount of time to put on weight so I could actually go to nationals. And then we ended up winning nationals. And I literally thought I could have missed out on this. Like, I don't want my eating to sort of rob me of anything else. So in that way, dance saved my life. So a bit different to the average person, where it contributes to an eating disorder, actually kind of pulled me out of an eating disorder. But definitely afterwards, I think the more I was kind of involved in dance studios and different things like that, and girls pulling their tops up to crop tops, and like everyone looking at themselves in the mirrors and everything like that, it was one of those things I had to be very conscious of. And I had to really kind of remind myself of why I was there. I was there to dance. I wasn't there to compare. I was there to dance. I wasn't there to have a six pack, you know. And I think because I was so passionate about dance, that helped. But I also had to really use a lot of tools to not compare, and to really kind of focus on the movement and what my body could do rather than how it looked. Yeah.
And at that point of time, were you getting help? Were you getting therapy during this time?
I got therapy. This was kind of on the other side of it, where my mum was amazing at keeping me accountable. And I could go to her and like with anything and just have an honest conversation about, hey, this happened at dance, or this person said this, or these girls are like looking this way, like, am I this? And just be able to ask questions in a safe place, which I think really helped me. And even like, because you know how you can compare, and then your mind goes into kind of this downward spiral, and you have a lot of questions. And often it's hard to actually reassure yourself or pull yourself out of that. And when you've had an eating disorder, you often don't know what's distortion and what's real either, with body image and what you're seeing for yourself. And so, yeah, my mum became a safe place of actually just being able to reassure me that what I saw sometimes wasn't necessarily true, as well as, yeah, reminding me of actually the purpose of dance over comparing, and over, yeah, comparing my body to someone else's as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like your mum was really good at helping you remember your why and keep your focus on what's truly important to you and what makes you actually happy, rather than your mind focusing so much on food or your body.
Yeah.
And I think you've just brought up a really powerful point here about the power of having somewhere to redirect your focus when you're trying to heal from that obsession over food and your body. And just for the girls listening, I just want you to know that both Jess and I understand that you don't have to have anorexia to be suffering from overthinking your food, from having anxiety around food, from having an all or nothing mentality where your perfectionist voice is like, well, you're either perfect or there's no point, you know. And so I hope those of you listening can understand that any tools that we bring up today, even if you don't have anorexia, I think these can be really beneficial. And yeah, Jess, I think, you know, you just talked about how you had somewhere to redirect your focus, that it wasn't just on food in your body. Would you reflect on that and also feel that was incredibly important to you?
Yeah, I think for me it was having that greater purpose to focus on, which really helped me. That helped me fight actually, and helped me kind of like, because I think we so often, when you're in an eating disorder or got disordered eating, like, you know, or you're just struggling, the fear of actually change is very real, because change is always unknown. And I think, yeah, in recovery, we often associate it with, getting fat or becoming out of control or different things like that. And it was really, and so I couldn't recover just thinking about, I'll put on weight. Like that was not going to ever make me recover. That was like the scariest thing in the world. But what helped me was actually just focusing on dance. And actually every meal, my focus was dance. Like I've got to do this so I can dance. I've got to do this because there's a greater purpose. And so really kind of redirecting my attention away from all of that to dance. And even it came down with that with body image too, like in classes, it was just redirecting away from body image, away from comparison to how can I actually nail these dance moves? And kind of having that greater purpose. How can I actually be the best dancer? How can I be creative and express myself through dance as well? So it's a real powerful tool to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also believe in, just I'm going through your website a little bit as well, something that you actually help clients with, and I do this as well, is actually helping them realize what their values are, like what's actually important to you outside of just food and body image. And I don't know, but I've found that really effective, and clearly you have too.
100%. Because I think what happens when you have, like, we're always taking on different values, right? And it can get confusing sometimes, like, because we take on this person's values, sometimes we hear this perspective, and there's so many different perspectives, so many different messages, and sometimes it all gets immersed with ours, and we don't actually know what our values are, and we're trying to conform to this and be that and be that. And then if you put an eating disorder on top of that, what happens normally is our values with the eating disorder go like this, and we really don't know what our values are. And so the eating disorder normally becomes stronger, and we normally pick up the eating disorder values and lose ourselves completely in it. So if you can actually kind of separate that and actually look at my values, like a lot of people with eating disorders, like, I just want to be healthy. But actually, if you look at it, the eating disorders, like, values around healthy versus actually your values around healthy are very different if you separate them. So it's really unpacking that and actually what you care about, and actually, all of those sorts of different things. I think, if you can unpack values, it really helps, because it's also creating who you are and coming back to actually who you are as a person. Because I think in the whole process of disordered eating and eating disorders, you really lose yourself and you don't actually know who you are anymore. So you go on this relearning and rediscovering journey. But on the other side, you come out with probably a stronger conviction around who you are and actually what your values are as well.
Absolutely. And I think you hit a really good point here, which is often we naturally just adopt values from other people or upbringing without actually questioning, hang on, is this important to me because I think it should be important to me, or is this important to me because it actually is? And I think with diet culture, and let me know if you agree, there's a lot of expectation of what we should value. It's almost like if you don't value health, like that's bad, like there's kind of like there's a list of things that we naturally get put onto us, and we're not really taught in school, are we, to sit down and think, okay, what is actually important to you? I mean, I never did a values exercise in school. Did you?
No, never. Instead, I think we're kind of like, we're kind of like raised to kind of take on what people say is true. A lot of the time it's like, if your school teacher says it, then it's true. Like, you're not taught to go and question things and kind of unpack things, which is actually a really powerful tool, instead of just taking what people say as Bible. But like, as kids, you grow up and it's like, if an adult says it, it's true. If friends say it, oh yeah, it's probably true. And you get lost in that. Whereas if you can actually learn to unpack things and actually question things and actually stop things before they get in here, into your heart and into your mind, and actually be like, actually, I don't agree with that. And that's okay. It's okay to have different views. Then it definitely helps you with all the different messages in society too. Because I mean, the health and fitness industry is obviously a multi-billion-dollar industry, which feeds off people's insecurities. And if you can't learn to unpack and the messages change. 1 minute it's like, look like this. 1 minute it's look like this. All because it keeps people trying to look like that. and keeps people paying money so they can look like the next thing, you know. But if you're not taught to dissect those different messages and actually then challenge them, you're going to end up being so lost and just conforming to whatever anyone wants you to be. Whereas if you can actually be like, actually, do I agree with this? Does it align with my values? It actually really helps you as a person.
Yes.
And it helps you have peace too. Like you actually have this inner peace and you're just knowing of who you are as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to reflect. And like you say, your values always change. And I'd be lying if I said growing up, from the amount of, comments that you get, you're beautiful, or you've got a great body. I would say that one of my strongest values at one point was how I looked. And I've even had this conversation with, some women, and we've gone through values. And one of the things that are on their values list is my appearance. And you can understand how that, that becomes a value, right? Because values are just things that are important to you. And if you've grown up, and from what other people are saying, it appears that, say, appearance is a really important thing to have in life. It's no wonder we almost adopt that as a value. And so I can almost sort of hear that would have been one of your values at one point, like, how your appearance.
Definitely. And I think we're like, I reflect on it with a lot of people. And I think we kind of like, if you look at movies like chick flicks, for example, I grew up watching chick flicks. I live in a household of sisters, and we used to watch chick flicks, and it's always this certain type of looking girl, which gets the guy, which gets the life, which gets this, which gets this. And if you think about the messages that sends us all from a young age, it's like, actually, you have to be thin, you have to look a certain way and be perfect to actually then be loved, or to actually have someone interested in you. So I think if you take those values on, it then forms all these beliefs around, actually, if I change, and if I don't look a certain way, maybe I won't be loved. And like, maybe I won't be accepted by people. Maybe I'll be the outsider, and I think it's been able to dissect that, but a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people I know is like, who is trapped in the cycle is like, I have to look this way, otherwise no one's going to love me, or otherwise I won't get to be married, and all those sorts of different things. But it's like, actually, it comes from this message. So it's always important to kind of reflect on, where is my values being shaped? Like, where have these messages come from? Because for me, that was so true. Like, I had to look a certain way until it was actually like, I started looking, this sounds bad, I don't know how to say it without sounding bad, but like, I started looking at other people who didn't look like the classic people on TV and different things. And I was like, they're actually popular. They're actually loved. Like, people actually really like them. They have a funny sense of humor. And I looked at what I valued with people, and I was like, I actually prefer to be around people who are really kind, funny, all those different things, than actually someone who may have the perfect body but no personality. So it was kind of like, that was a big kind of realization for me as well.
Yes, and although I know social media, it's a blessing and a curse these days, isn't it? Because I've really, really enjoyed following one of my favorite women to follow. Do you know Jenna Kutcher?
Yes.
Yeah. So women like her, I aspire to be like somebody like Jenna, who is just super, like, she focuses so much on, like, it's all about her business, and everything she focuses on has nothing to do with how she looks or what she's eating. And I think it's really cool that we've got women like out there in different body shapes and sizes who are showing that, what is appearance? Like, what does it even mean? Like, how does that help us grow or serve others? If those are some of the key things that we're here to do, grow and to serve others, what really does our appearance do?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I often say to people, how do you want to be remembered? Like, it sounds morbid but people at funerals don't get up and be like, oh, they were skinny, oh, this. Like, no one's gonna care. Whereas people actually care about what you did and how you made them feel. And I think what you just said before is really powerful around appearance. Like, appearance shouldn't just be what you look like as a person. in your physical body, but appearance is so much more than that. It's actually who you are. It's how you make people feel. It's like what you're doing, because you can inspire people with what you do as well. And like what this sort of impact you're actually having in this world is. And it is really all of that greater purpose than having a perfect body. And there's so much more to people than having a perfect body. And if you become so focused on having a perfect body, you lose those other things normally. So it's about where you place your value.
100%, 100%. Okie dokie. So on this topic, body image and relationship with food, I'm really curious, do you have any ongoing challenges that you still have to be mindful of today? So obviously you've got a lot of tools up in your toolkit, but do you still get triggered?
Yes, I think there'll always be triggers, but I think it's about knowing. I think it's about having someone you're accountable to. Like there's been times where I have probably very easily nearly gone backwards, but I've had someone pull me up, whether it's my mum or my husband, and it's been like, in that moment, it's been like, oh, I have a choice. I'm not going down that path.
Okay. And what do you mean? What do you mean by going backwards? Are we talking about restricting your food? Are we talking about negative self-talk around your body, diets?
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So over-exercising, restricting food, negative self-talk around my body, without even knowing it. And you get praise. Like it probably happened a number of years ago when I was working at a gym, and I started exercising more, started restricting more. I was in that gym culture, which isn't bad. It's just the motive behind it can be bad,
Yeah.
and the motive was to change my appearance, and it felt good, and I thought it was all safe until we were in the Gold Coast on holiday, and I was like to my husband, okay, so we're going to the gym. Like, let's go to the gym right now. And he was like, I'm not going today. Like, we've been going too much. And he was like, and I don't think you should go either. And I was like, no, I have to go to the gym. And I realized I didn't have a choice. It went from actually me having a choice to me not having a choice. Otherwise, I knew I was going to feel guilty and like anxious. And I walked out to go down the elevator, and I literally thought, oh, I need to not do this. Otherwise, I'm just going to entertain and go down into an eating disorder. And I went back inside. I took my gym clothes off, and I just cried and cried and cried. But it shifted something, and I didn't go. It was like I was fine after that. And it was just like I went and got food, and it was practicing the opposite action probably in that moment, and actually me being in control instead of the eating disorder being in control. So that's been a time. And then probably like I've just had a baby. So I have a little 5-month-old baby, and my body has changed so much because obviously you grow a little human. And I think for me, at the start, I was really sick in pregnancy. I was in another hospital, so I lost a lot of weight and got a lot of compliments. And part of me was like, oh, maybe I should just keep restricting. Like I cannot eat like I've been not eating. But then I was like, actually, I've got to nourish a baby. And I was like, also, that's really stupid. But those thoughts creep in. But you've just got to be on your A game and be like, actually, no, that's actually not my thought. It doesn't align with my values. It's not who I am. And I don't want to go down that path. Like I would never, ever want to go back to where I was. And I think the like 5 months after as well, of giving birth, like I've had to learn to actually be kind to my body. Because I'm in mums groups, and mums are like, oh yeah, I'm doing this to lose weight. I'm doing this. And there's a part of me which is like, I should just do this. I could fix it and go back to my pre-baby weight. But instead of actually being like, actually, how do I be kind, and like, how do I not let an eating disorder creep in? Like, and I think being kind to yourself is nourishing your body, and being kind to yourself is actually like looking after your body and exercising, but it's the motive. And so I'm always checking my motive of like, is this disordered or is this actually healthy? And I've really had to like really challenge the negative self-talk as well. And the comparison to other mums, like, oh, how did their stomach get like that so fast, but then it's like, actually, no, I can't do that. And it comes back to that whole greater purpose of actually, my body's incredible. I birthed a baby. And now I have a baby, and my priority in the season is to not have a skinny, perfect body, but it's actually to look after my baby. and actually get enough nutrition for my baby and be a mum and enjoy the season too. So yeah.
Thank you so much. You just gave so many tools, that, women listening can use. You just beautifully articulated what the triggers are still that pop up, 10 plus years later, we still get compliments if we lose weight, or if we're small. Like, that hasn't changed. All of us will be dealing with that potentially for the rest of our lives. I can't see that changing. So you're still getting these triggers, not just with the comments, but like you say, your body's changed in the same way that it changes from teenage, when we like pre-puberty to puberty, the same way that it changes from, when we go through menopause and when we get old. Like, we're going to be hit with body change and these comments. And so we really do need these tools in our toolkit, don't we, in order to be resilient. And from what I'm sort of gathering, some of the core tools that you use is knowing your values, knowing your purpose, and and the self-compassion is a big one too, isn't it? As a tool in itself, learning to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
In terms of the inner dialogue, is there anything that you do specifically if you have like a negative thought come in? Do you journal? Is there any particular affirmations that you feel like you have in your toolkit?
Yeah, totally. I think when we have a negative thought come in, we can either entertain it, and that can spiral very fast. And when I say entertain it, is like, I probably did this one night. I was really tired and I should have known better. But I was really tired with having a newborn, and I've been comparing myself to people, and I was like, started typing in postpartum bodies 5 months or like 4 months to see what people's bodies look like, to see if I was actually just the exception, and if I and that never leads anywhere good. And then I just ended up comparing myself to people's bodies on the internet. And I literally just had to then challenge myself and be like, number one, you never know what's true, what's on the internet. Like, you never know people's stories. You don't know what's true. Anyone can post anything. It's not valid. It's not, there's no evidence behind it. And I was actually like, number two, this isn't actually, like, why should I care? And so really had to kind of come back. And for me, it is a lot of thought challenging. And I learned this tool in my recovery. And what that looked like for me was having a journal, having a line down the middle of a piece of paper, writing down, I had anorexia versus what could be the truth, because I didn't believe it. And it was replacing so it was like writing down all the lies, which felt so real. Like, the lies felt real, and they felt valid, and they seemed real because like my senses aligned. Like, it was like I saw what I wrote. I felt what I wrote. Like, I felt big when I was anorexic, all those different things. So it felt like I was going against my senses as well. But then I'd write down, okay, what actually could be the truth? Because you can't just be like, no, that's not true. Because if you challenge a thought, you've got to replace it then with something else to create a new thought pattern. And so it was, a whole lot of replacing thoughts. So I use that as a tool. Whereas now that I'm used to that, I can just do it in my mind. So if I have a negative thought come in, I'll actually challenge it and actually then replace it with what could be true. And it's also, I think, a big part of it for me is all throughout my recovery, I had people who would reassure me and kind of coach me through it in the way of like, you can do this, Jess, like encourage me. And now I've learned I had to coach myself. So it's actually coaching yourself and actually being like, come on, Jess, like, you don't have to go along with this. Come on, Jess, like, actually there's a greater purpose here for you. And it's really coaching myself of, let's not focus on this in this season. It's only going to rob you of actually the fun times you can have with your baby. And impact your feelings in a negative way. So it's that thought challenging, and then actually the coaching, but also doing the opposite action sometimes has power. So if you have a negative thought, it's often like, okay, like say in an eating disorder, if the eating disorder is like, don't do that or don't have that, it's actually doing the opposite, because it's actually you regaining power. Because it's not about becoming out of control, but it's about you gaining control and the eating disorder losing control. And same with that inner dialogue sometimes. And the more we kind of do challenge it, because you can challenge it in your mind, but also you can challenge it with your behaviors. And the more you challenge it with behaviors, the more evidence you kind of get of actually my worst fears didn't happen. And I find if I'm eating regularly and I'm looking after myself, I actually have a more positive body image than if I'm actually restricting and not taking care of myself. So yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really nice that you've expressed to the people like listening that the journey doesn't end once you have coaching, once you get people's help, and it's about gaining these tools and then being able to continually apply them throughout your life. I think where a lot of women potentially could get, I don't know, get that negative voice saying, oh, it should be gone by now, you should be better, is, you know, if they say go through a period of therapy and gaining the tools and just hoping that they would just have to go through it for a few months and then it just stick forever. But it isn't really the case, is it? You can have all the knowledge and all the tools, but it is a bit of a lifelong practice. And I think it needs to be a lifelong practice because of the constant triggers we have in society.
Yeah, and that word practice is key.
Sorry?
That word practice is key. Like, you can have all the tools, but if you don't use tools, they're not going to be any use to you, right? Like, I have some people I give tools to and they never use them. And they wonder why things don't change, or they'll use them once, but it's tools you have to repeat over and over and over and over again. And that's what actually brings real change. Because yeah, a lot of people are like, I went away and did thought challenging. I'm like, how often did you do it? And they're like, oh, once. Whereas like for me, thought challenging, especially when I was in recovery, was every single meal, in between meals. It was constant, because it was really shifting those thoughts, because my thoughts didn't just stop. And so yeah, if you want to see change, you often have to repeat those tools over and over again.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I've noticed. And I think it's important to set that expectation for that, I think, at the beginning of your journey. So for those listening, if you're in a space where you are struggling with your relationship with food, or you're working on your body image, be really, really kind to yourself. If you have days where all the thoughts come back, it can get a bit confusing though, can't it? Because you can go through periods of time where you don't have any of those negative thoughts, and it's like, oh great, like I don't have to worry about this anymore. And then something happens and it comes back, and I think in those moments, you can potentially get quite hard on yourself and get frustrated. I thought I'd done this. I thought I can just tick this off my list of things that I've worked through and never have to look at it again. But it just doesn't work like that, does it?
Yeah. I mean, we both work as professionals, right, in the field, and we have all the tools. We're giving tools. But we still need to use those tools. And like, I can still have a bad body image moment, but I guess the difference, like for me, people often ask the question around, like, is there such thing as full freedom? And I say yes. And the way of,
yeah.
I think what's different is like in an eating disorder, like eating disorder versus recovery, it's not that you don't have some of those thoughts or some of those feelings. It's just that they're not as strong and you're more in control. Because when you're in your eating disorder, you're out of control and you have it, and it's so intense and it's so excruciating, it's so awful, and the thoughts are so loud. Whereas for me, on the other side of what I'd say full recovery is I can have some of those thoughts and some of those feelings, but they're not very loud, and I'm actually the one in control. If that makes sense. That's just my
perspective. Does, and that is a different perspective to what I've heard other nutrition, or what do I say, eating disorder nutritionists and dietitians say before, and it's really good to get your perspective. Other perspectives I've had is that you're not fully recovered until you no longer have those thoughts. But it's quite nice to hear that you see it as it's not that black and white, and that you can consider yourself fully recovered even if you still have those thoughts come in, as long as you, like you say, they're not as loud. You know how to move through them, to not let them negatively impact you, whether that's in an action or whether it ruins your day. And so I think that's really cool. That's really cool to hear. I think that makes it feel a little bit more realistic to people out there who are trying to get, to the point where they're like, you know what, I've healed my relationship with food, and that can still include the occasional body image thought or stress around food thought. So I think that's, yeah, I would personally agree with that perspective. Yeah. Okay, so the final thing we're going to talk about is finding this balance between how do we focus on our health without it being perpetuating the old habits and the old thought patterns. I think I'm personally still figuring this one out, where when I want to focus like more on my food and my exercise, there's part of me that's like, you know, is this bad? Like even going back into trying to run like 5Ks, for me it like can bring back thoughts of, well, you used to run to lose weight. Like, you know, can you do this in a way that is purely self-care? But not even just that, it's also, we want to try and balance out where we put our energy, right? And I think there is this fine balance between putting enough energy into health and fitness, because that's important and it makes us feel great, but not let that then take over all of our whole life and all of our thoughts, because there's issues that come up with both sides, right? If we neglect, you know, I've completely neglected my nutrition and fitness at one point in my life, and that wasn't good either. And yet other times I focused so much on it that, you know, again, it was just the other extreme. So I'm curious, like, do you navigate this little balance yourself?
Yeah, massively, because nutrition's good, right? Like actually eating food is good. Like nutrition is good, and eating nutritious food is good for you too. But also exercise is good. And it's not a case of it like being good or bad at all. Because I guess in an eating disorder, like often you get exercise taken off you, you know, and all those sorts of different things. And it can become quite black and white. But for me, how I navigate it is I always check the motive. And it's always keeping my motives in check, of like, am I doing this purely to lose weight, or am I actually doing this purely to actually look after my body, and actually because it feels good? And even then, that feel good thing I have to keep in check too, because it has to be within reason. And I, like, you know, your motives, right? So when I can see it's an unhealthy motive, I won't actually do it. So if it's an unhealthy motive, like say going for a run, I'll actually be like, I'm not going to go for a run today, because that gives me power. And puts me back in control instead of the eating disorder, you know. Otherwise, if I win it probably just leaves space and entertainment for an eating disorder to kind of come back and for it to spiral, which has happened for me in the past. Like it's just become unhealthy. And so, yeah, it's always checking the motive behind it. And then, or if say there's some thoughts there around, oh, just, you know, go a little bit further to do this, to burn this, I'll be like, actually, no, I won't go further. I'll actually just do what I was going to do. So it's kind of doing that opposite, but also challenging those thoughts of actually, I don't have to go further. Like I'm actually doing this to look after my body, and I don't actually need to do this to lose weight. So it has been able to do thought challenging as well. And then I think with food too, for me, I personally can't restrict anything. Because it's just not gonna, I'll just end up restricting. Like it becomes addictive for me. And
I'd probably be the same, to be honest. I think as soon as I say you can't have that, or you need to not have that, I'm the same. The thoughts just come straight back.
It's like opening the door for an eating disorder, you know, or disordered eating. So instead, for me, it's about, okay, yeah, sometimes I realize, oh, I actually need to include more fruit and veggies in my diet, but that doesn't mean I take out other things. It just is I need to include this more, and actually look after my body while including other foods as well, and having fun foods, and making sure really, like, my therapist said something to me which was probably one of the only things which really stuck out in therapy, apart from me, all my other memories of me like yelling at them and storming out. Awful. My therapist told me, he just said, Jess, if you eat everything in moderation, you're actually never going to get fat. Like it's safe. And I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. And so for me, that's kind of just how I've lived my life, is just eat everything in moderation. And
Mm.
some days I crave more of this than this, and it's learning to listen to my body too. Like throughout pregnancy, I had the weirdest cravings. Like one minute I was craving carrots and I was eating bags of carrots. Next minute I was craving milk, and it was learning to actually trust my body, that my body actually knows what it needs as well. And I think you need to be in a healthy space so that you can actually listen to your body. Because if you're in an unhealthy space, you're actually not going to listen to your body as well. And obviously, I'm terrible with all that stuff, but the chemistry you need to be a healthy weight. You need to be having nutrition and stuff for hormones and hunger hormones and stuff to work too. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's a fine line there, though, a very fine line.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I know a lot of women struggle with. They've got such a strong health value, and they really care about their health, and they want to be like the best version of them, but they also value things like fun and like enjoying food. Like for a lot of women I work with, they actually value having yum in their life, and socializing in their relationships. And so it is.
Yeah.
I do agree. I think we can absolutely find that balance, and you kind of provided some good tools there. Going back to what is the motivation behind this, and just checking on your thoughts as well.
Yeah, definitely, Keith. But yeah, like food is made to be fun. Like I say to people that a lot of like memories that we create is actually around food. And it's a positive thing, like social things like birthdays and Christmas and all of that. And unfortunately, when you have disordered eating or eating disorder, all you kind of remember about those events is the guilt and the anxiety, and it really robs you of the occasion and the relationships. And for me, I never want to go back to a place of being robbed again. Like freedom far outweighs that. So,
I'm curious. So something that I talk to a lot of clients about is what sort of visualization or imagery they bring up in their minds, and that can either create positive feelings or it can create feelings of like guilt and anxiety. And I'm curious, like, do you ever remember back? Do you often remember back to the previous experiences that you've had, and does that actually help motivate you to carry on with this positive relationship with food? Can you almost see yourself sometimes, and you make that image and you choose, that's why I'm not going back?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because literally when I look back on my eating disorder, I just remember it as just a really dark, lonely, isolating, horrible feelings, like just excruciating, hopeless time, where there was no purpose to my life than food and counting calories and everything like that. And that was my whole world. I thought it was going to expand my world. Like I thought that everyone would love me. I thought that I would be the best at this. I thought this. I thought I was just going to get a life, But with it, it just robbed me and it shrunk my world. Everyone was there at the start when I give me compliments, but then all those people that gave me compliments weren't there when I was really unwell. And it was just me and my eating disorder and doctor's appointments and blood tests, and there was nothing fun. There was no life in that. And that's how I remember it. And then I look back at even when I got compliments, I often reflect on, I got compliments from being this skinny, like shop people, like retailers would be like, oh, if only I could look like you. And I literally look back now and there's nothing in me which wants to go back to looking that way. I look back and I'm like, that's so sad that they thought that, because they had no idea that my kidneys were shutting down, that I was so unwell, and the battle inside my head, and that it just isn't worth it. So it does motivate me to be free, because I'm like, a life of freedom is just so worth it. It's so worth fighting for. It's so worth living in. And I would rather be a healthy weight than be anorexic and have no life.
It's like you say, it decreased your choices in life, and it shrunk your life bubble, whereas now you're living a fulfilling life, doing all the things that you want to do, living by your values.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is a beautiful transformation. Okay, so Jess, just before we finish off, because I know you've done some values work, my final question for you is, what would be your top 5 values? I'd love for you to share.
I do a lot of values work with other people, and I know my values, but top 5, I would say for me, probably my faith. That's personal to me. And then just loving people. I love people. So loving people is massive for me. And actually just encouraging people. I'm really passionate about, probably another thing is value is creating things, like stepping out and actually creating things, but creating things which impact people. So I'm really passionate about seeing women find freedom, but also find a greater purpose for their life. So that's a huge value of mine. Doing family well is a new value probably of mine. I've probably never put so much focus on it, but I want to create a healthy family space for my son to grow up in. How many have I said? 4? 5. Having fun, like enjoying life and just having fun, like enjoying the journey, because I think the journey is really what we can make it. Like, we can go through a journey and make it hell, or we can actually make it fun and laugh at ourselves through mistakes and all those sorts of different things too. So having fun is another key thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I know for sure that girls listening in on that, that will have spiked them to think about, what are my values? Like, what are the things that are important to me outside of just food and my body? So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And you are living those values, which I think is just so cool. And it just shows what can be achieved when you do that personal growth, you do the self-reflection, you put the time in that you have done but are still doing to work on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been my absolute pleasure. Where can people find you?
Redefinecoaching.co. I've been terrible with social media, so I've just got someone doing social media for us. So you can head over to Redefine Coaching on Instagram, on Facebook. I think there's a TikTok. I've never been on TikTok in my life, but I got told there's TikTok. So all those different platforms. And then my personal Instagram as well is just JESS DYSON. So yeah,
you're a real people person. So if people just want to flick your message and saying, "Loved your chat, Jess," you most welcome that.
Definitely. I love hearing feedback. I love talking to people too. I get lots of DMs and I love it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go, everybody. You can DM Jess if you want to connect with her. Thanks everybody for watching this episode. Do let us know if you've enjoyed the chat, and we'll see you next episode.